This is your recap from June 24th, day 29 in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Prosecution wrapped up its case after nearly 7 weeks of testimony, and the defense opted to not call any new witnesses. Combs himself also spoke for the first time in court, briefly addressing the judge about his decision not to testify. The day in court started out with prosecution finishing their testimony of their final witness, who was Homeland Security Special Agent Joseph Cercillo. He walked jurors through travel, hotel, payment, and phone records that investigators say tied Combs and his businesses to alleged years long of sex trafficking. The jurors wore headphones to privately view explicit video from Combs' notorious freak-off parties. Prosecutors argue that Combs kept these videos as potential blackmail to ensure the women's silence. As an example, Combs' ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura testified that he threatened to release such tapes, saying, "I just feared for my career. I feared for my family. It's horrible and disgusting. No one should do that to anyone." By midday, prosecutors formally rested their case, concluding more than 6 weeks of testimony from 34 different witnesses. These witnesses painted a picture of an alleged criminal enterprise dating back to 2004 in which Combs used violence, threats, money, drugs, and power to convince these women into participating into his freak-off parties. Combs has pled not guilty to all charges. Combs' defense team had signaled that they would not call any defense witnesses, which is a relatively common strategy in a high-stakes trial. Because the burden of proof is on the prosecution, the defense isn't required to present its own witnesses. During cross-examination of the Homeland Security agent, defense lawyer Teeny Garagos used the opportunity to highlight text messages suggesting that the women were willing participants. She brought up flirty and explicit messages to show that the defense's key point that the accusers voluntarily, even enthusiastically, took part. Once the prosecution rested, the defense made a standard motion to dismiss in this case, which was heard while the jury was out at lunch. Defense attorney Alexandra Shapiro argued that prosecutors failed to prove a criminal conspiracy of sex trafficking a crime under the law. Shapiro argued that domestic violence is not sex trafficking and evidence didn't show Cassie was engaged in any sexual activity because of violence. She also insisted there was no evidence that Combs' staff agreed to facilitate crimes. His employees, she says, didn't know much, if anything, about what went on between Mr. Combs and his girlfriends in those hotel rooms, other than they used a lot of baby oil and perhaps used drugs. The judge did listen to the defense's arguments, but did not grant an immediate acquittal. Diddy's lawyers entered a few exhibits into evidence and read an agreed statement of facts into the record. They used the short